So hello and welcome to the video. I've been doing this YouTube lark for 5 years now. I created this channel on August the 14th, 2020 and released my first video on the 11th of September. Not an auspicious date in history when it comes to aviation, but it worked 5 years ago and it does make it easy for me to remember the date. Over the 5 years since, I've released something like 275 videos, which I reckon is about 55 hours of content. And to put that into context, that's longer than the entire runs of Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul or Stranger Things, none of which I've actually ever watched, but I've watched all of my stuff several times over. And those videos have elicited something like 3.5 million views and 430,000 hours of watch time, which means you guys have watched about 50 years worth of my nonsense. So in this video, I'm going to celebrate the channel's 5th anniversary by sharing a little of what I've learned over these years. And next week there'll be a companion video in which I'll show a little more of how I YouTube. This video won't be for everyone, so if that's enough for you, thanks so much for the support, and I hope I can retain your interest deeper into future videos. And if you're new and are here as you're thinking of YouTubing yourself, I hope there'll be some insights in here that will be valuable. So if that sounds good, now I never expected to develop a catchphrase, and I honestly can't remember when I first used it. But someone commented on a couple of words I used to say really early on, and as it was something I was trying to say to drive viewer retention, I said it again and kept on saying it. So if that sounds good, stick around.
Hi, I'm Matt and this is Matt's Planet. I aim to entertain, educate and inspire with my travel adventures from planning to execution. I'll show you how you can travel in style for a lot less than you'd think. So subscribe so you can come with me. I should probably start with the backstory, as a lot of you will have subscribed since I last told it. Before my first video, I'd been an accountant for 25 years. I can't really remember why I became an accountant, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. And I did the chartered accounting exams, got some letters after my name, and people seemed to want to employ me. I'll certainly have a crack at your tax returns, but I never was that sort of accountant, and I don't actually do my own taxes these days. Instead, I was a commercial accountant and I spent probably 15 years either as a finance director or as a chief financial officer. I specialised in multi-site businesses, which means retail or hospitality companies, so shops, bars and restaurants, and I even spent some time running nightclubs. The great thing about being an accountant is that it's a global profession. You'll find debits and credits wherever you go. And I took full advantage of that and was able to live in Australia, Singapore, the Philippines and the United States, as well as the UK. In 2017, my father's health began to fade, and as I was consulting with a few businesses at that stage of my career, I was able to reduce my hours a bit to be able to spend more time with him back in the family home in Folkestone. I was living in London at the time. He died in 2018, so I reduced my hours even more so I could then spend more time with my widowed mother. It got to the point where it didn't make financial sense to maintain my separate place in London, so when the lease was up, I reduced my hours some more and moved back to Folkestone. That was October 2019, and I intended to stay in Folkestone for perhaps 6 months before going back to London and resuming my career. Then, in January 2020, there were reports on the news of people coughing in China. And a few weeks later, they were coughing in Italy. And a few weeks after that, they were coughing everywhere and we were locked down. The clients I had left were all non-essentials, they all shuttered. And I was left, somewhat stranded, locked down in Folkestone with no work, no ability to go anywhere, and with nothing to do. So like a lot of people, I watched a lot of YouTube. I watched Noel, Josh, Paul, Dennis, Jeb and plenty of others and thought that doing something similar would be enormous fun. I didn't think I could make better videos than any of them, but I knew a bit about the world, having travelled a lot. The flight reviewers I watched tended to not talk that much about the places they were flying to, and I knew a fair bit about how to get a good deal on flights and on status.
I'd already done a number of tier point runs by this point, and when I wasn't on YouTube, I was probably on Flyer Talk. So I applied my accountant's brain to the world of YouTube flight reviews, and the outline of a channel concept emerged. I could educate people on how to fly better, inspire them to do so with what I did, and hopefully entertain them on the way. I thought it might be a fun way of passing some time, as I had no idea how long we'd all be locked up for, and I thought I might develop some interesting skills that might be useful when I went back to accounting. So I started writing scripts. Of course, you couldn't actually travel anywhere back then, so my first videos had to focus on the educational side of things, but when lockdown eased at the start of September 2020, I was able to make a few quick trips, and so was able to include some flight reviews in the initial wave of videos that I released. And on September the 11th, I released the first of perhaps half a dozen videos I'd made in the preceding few months. I got a big boost from being mentioned on Head for Points when my sub count was in the low hundreds, and I started to really enjoy it. So much so that I kept doing it even when things thawed out in 2021 and I could have gone back to counting beans. And the rest is history. So what have I learned? Well, to get some structure to this stream of consciousness, I'll list 6 things. The first is the importance of niches. You can visualize YouTube as an enormous wall of pigeonholes. Creators make videos, YouTube allocates them to a pigeonhole, and viewers who've previously watched stuff from that pigeonhole are offered similar content, including perhaps yours. So flight reviews are a well-defined pigeonhole, as is bagpipe music. If you create a channel focused on either of those things, YouTube will know what to do with your videos. The pigeonhole is obvious. If you alternate content between flight reviews and bagpipe music, YouTube won't know what to do with you and may not offer your content to anyone, because people get annoyed with YouTube if they want an aviation video and end up getting bagpipes. So the learning is pick a niche and stick with it. Now, I joined a number of forums when I started out, and I'd often see people asking what niche they should make content for. If you have to ask that question, don't create a YouTube channel. You need to have passion and a deep understanding of whatever niche you choose to be credible to viewers. Personal finance is recognised as the best paying niche, but if you're an 18-year-old Zimbabwean or Indonesian who knows precisely nothing about the US pension market, starting a channel about that particular niche is just not going to work, however well paid it is. And this is a mistake that I made. When lockdowns eased, I went on a number of cruises with my mum, and I made videos about them. Now, YouTube gives you outstanding insights into how your videos are performing through its analytics tools. So when I released 2 or 3 aviation videos in a row, you could see that YouTube knew my niche, so each new video was offered to more people. Then I'd release a cruise video and I'd completely lose momentum. Cruising is a different niche, and YouTube didn't know who to offer it to. I'd then release another aviation video, which would confuse YouTube again, and this new video would end up being offered to a far lower number of people than it would have been had I not broken my flow with a cruise video. So I did what seemed logical and started a second channel, Matt's Oceans. The idea being to separate out my cruise content so those videos would fit into a different pigeonhole, allowing both types of content to thrive. And things went well. Both channels grew and I was able to feed content into both. I actually thought the Oceans channel would end up being the bigger one. It's a tighter community than aviation, and I thought I'd have a better chance of achieving scale in that smaller community, which is my third point, community. But I need to talk first about money, and I'll come back to second channels in a moment as well. Now, I make money from the advertising that YouTube puts around my content. Travel is a decent paying niche to be in, and I have 2 other advantages in that my audience is older and richer than the average YouTubers. YouTube is owned by Google, so collectively they know a lot about you. so they can target advertising quite tightly to your interests, and advertisers will pay more to get in front of older and richer viewers. Now, I get 55% of that advertising revenue, and YouTube/Google keeps the other 45%. Now, that might sound like a bad deal for me, but I'm happy with it. In return for that 45% share, YouTube hosts and distributes my videos, finds and deals with advertisers, and runs a massive ecosystem to administer it all. All I have to do is make videos that people want to watch. I'd like more than 55%, obviously, but given what YouTube and Google have to do to make the whole system work, I'm actually happy with the relationship. So I earn money from the advertising, but it's not a lot of money. Even now, 5 years in, with 3.5 million views behind me, I don't make anything like a living from the advertising revenue I get from YouTube. I talk more about this in a little more detail with my patrons, but I'll say here that I've not yet broken the £1,000 barrier for a month's income from YouTube. So I earn less than 10 grand a year from the advertising, and don't forget the niche I'm in is one of the most expensive there is to offer. If I just made videos like this from home, that income would all be mine. But I don't. I travel, and I usually travel in premium cabins, which are expensive to access, even if you use the tips and hacks I share to get into those seats for a lot less than the quoted fares. They still cost a lot of money. So back to community, and quite early on I sensed there was a strong community of people consuming my content who wanted a little more than just a weekly video. So I decided to create a Patreon group quite early on. I watched a few videos on how to do it on YouTube, of course, and I generally said not to even consider it until you have at least 10,000 subscribers. But I went for it when I had less than 3,000, and it's been amazing. By far the most rewarding part of the whole journey I've been on. Now, I'm going to try to not make this next bit sound like an advert, but the Patreon group is amazing. Members get early access to my videos, but from the middle tier up, they also get access to a WhatsApp group. We talk about all sorts of fun stuff, from trains to hotels to airlines, and there's even a fantasy football league. My member retention rate is very high, which means very few people don't find value from the group and decide to leave. But probably the most fun is meetups. I host 3 or 4 UK meetups around the country each year, and I also invite patrons on summer and winter trips. We had close to 30 people in Munich last Christmas, and we're off to Lisbon quite soon. So my Patreon income is now about double my YouTube ad income, which alongside a few affiliate relationships I have in place means that overall I treble the income I get from YouTube advertising. So now in year 5, my revenues are starting to reach the level where I can consider myself to be doing okay. And there's now a little bit left over after paying for all of my travel. So the moral of this is don't start a YouTube channel expecting to get rich. Very few people achieve the sort of runaway success you might hope to achieve. You'll only hear about the ones that do, of course, but there are tens of thousands of others who grind at this for years before giving up as they just can't make a living wage. So how can I afford to still do this if it's not been making me a living? Well, I was an accountant for 25 years, so my financial situation was probably stronger than average when I started this. Plus, I still live with my mum, the rock and roll dream you might say, so my living costs are negligible. But I absolutely love doing this. It's the best job I've ever had, and I do sometimes wonder why I wasted so much of my life being an accountant rather than doing something creative like this. And the channel continues to grow, so the income continues to rise. If I maintain the kind of growth rates I've seen for another 3 or 5 years, the finances could become quite interesting. It's been a long apprenticeship, and it doesn't change my advice to not do this for the money, but the 5 years of pretty much full-time work I've put in may well pay me back in the long run. If I stopped making new videos today, the back catalogue would continue to earn me income for years to come. The other dimension of community I want to talk about is comments. This can be a tough topic for some creators, but for me it's really not been a problem. Firstly, I still reply to every comment I receive. I started doing it as it increases engagement with your videos. The more comments YouTube sees attached to a video, the more engaging it considers that video to be, so the more it will promote it, even if half of those comments have come from the creator themselves. And once I got into the habit of replying to each and every comment, I couldn't stop. I can't bear for there to be unanswered comments in the YouTube studio. Now, I've had nearly 17,000 comments in total since I launched, so if half of them are mine, that's just under 5 comments received and 5 comments replied to each and every day since my channel launched. That perhaps doesn't sound too bad, but I get 100 or more comments on days when videos launch. But I haven't stopped, and I can't see myself stopping anytime soon. I think it's important to engage with all of them as it creates a relationship with those commenting. I'm a real person who is approachable and responsive, and I do get questions and I give advice too. People just have to ask. It is very, very rare for me to get an outright nasty comment. I joke that my content is so dull that trolls can't bear to watch it for long enough to say anything nasty about it, and I joke, but there's probably some truth to it. And YouTube does a good job of ring fencing any nasty stuff you do get so it doesn't show up on your channel anyway, unless you approve it. And you can easily block users from the channel if you don't like what they say. They can still comment, but no one else will ever see it. I've never had to block anyone from the channel, although I know from speaking with other YouTubers that I am very much in the minority from not having to do so. If a comment is critical but polite, I'll engage with it. People got really upset with me for putting my still-shoed feet on the ottoman in my Swiss first-class seat, as it can be used for buddy dining. And people get really upset when I say Swiss Air instead of just Swiss, or if I say Singapore Airways instead of Singapore Airlines, or Qatar Airlines instead of Qatar Airways. Now, you might consider these slips to all be a bit trivial, but it really bothers some people. And when it does, provided they present their annoyance politely, I'll engage with them and try and take the criticism on board. Here's a couple of constructively critical comments from my recent Thai first class video. They're reasonably polite, so I engaged with them. Hey, every comment and every response boosts me in the algorithm, so asking me who cares actually increases the reach of the video. I doubt that people leaving these comments realise that this is the effect of doing so. And this was a nasty one I got to that same video. It got ring-fenced because of the language, so I deleted it and didn't dignify it with a response. But I'm going to share it here, and I find it highly amusing that this came from someone who's named themselves Be Happy by Choice. Not very nice, but also not very accurate. I know others get a lot worse. So the learning is, don't do this if you have a thin skin. 99.9% of my comments are positive and supportive, and those are the ones I choose to focus on. So back to second channels, and launching my Patreon account made my Planet channel and the community I'd built around it the clear number one, even if I thought, and I still probably think, that Oceans has more potential. Another challenge I've had is that my mother's health is now failing and she can't cruise anymore. There are short cruises that I could go on and review, but they tend to be party cruises with limited shore time, so aren't great videos to make. So going overseas and taking a 7-night cruise becomes a major investment of time and money. I might get 3 or 4 videos out of a 7-night cruise, but I typically get a video a day out of a filming trip for the Planet channel, videos which I'll then release on a channel with 10 times the subscriber base. So I've decided that Matt's Planet is going to be the focus now, and Oceans will remain firmly in the background. I still love cruising, but it's much harder for me to justify taking a cruise now. Although I have taken 2 cruises that you've not seen yet, and have every intention about making videos about them, as they were both really good fun. So one last point on second channels. There is one very good reason for starting a second channel, a reason I've only quite recently worked out myself. Back to money, and I've been approached perhaps 100 times to advertise things for people. Often things I've never heard of, I don't really understand, and I would never use myself. So I've always said no. But a couple of months ago I was approached by a brand that I have heard of, did understand, and would use myself, So I have done an advertising integration, and that video will be along in 2 weeks. I can't say how much I'm being paid, but I can say that it was based on the average views of my last X videos. So to illustrate, if X was 4 and those 4 videos achieved 5, 30 and 60,000 views each, that would average 25,000 views, and that's then the basis for your fee. But I have a pretty good idea of which videos are going to do well and which ones won't. So if I'd released those 2 poorer performing videos on a second channel and left my primary channel with only the 30 and 60,000 view videos, that would average 45,000 views, and I could just about double the fee I charged. I'd release the same video which would achieve the same views, but if I actively curated my main channel's content, I could charge a lot more for ads, which is why very successful creators have second channels and why they only release content to their main channels when they're confident they will be blockbusters. Which I guess brings me to the last point, which is what would I have done differently? And the answer is, well, very little. One thing I could have done is been far more aggressive in pursuing growth and therefore income. I could have said yes to a number of those approaches I had to advertise stuff, even if I didn't really understand what I was advertising. I could have loaded my videos up with more ads from Google. All creators can control when ads appear in their videos, even if many pretend that they can't. And I actually space my ads out a lot more than YouTube suggests. Plus, I could have marketed my channel to companies to get them interested in advertising with me. But I didn't. And you'll notice that all of those things revolve around subjecting you to more advertising. And that, I think, is the learning. YouTube is not a quick win. I'm 5 years in and I'm starting to see some tangible benefits of the time I've invested. Time I've been able to invest as my financial position is unusual and I've been able to devote myself to something I absolutely love doing rather than having to do something just for the money. YouTube doesn't have to fund my retirement, but it could well make my retirement more comfortable. Plus, by still living in Folkestone, I can support my mum, whose health is not perfect, and there's intangible value to me in being able to do that. Plus, midway through my YouTube journey, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Now, that sounds dramatic, and there's been no need for me to do anything at all about it yet, and hopefully I won't have to do anything about it for many years to come, perhaps decades. But a diagnosis like that does shift your mindset and makes you realise that enjoying what you spend your day doing is hugely valuable, even if that value is largely non-financial. So there you go. I planned a quick 10-minute ramble, but that's probably another learning. If you have interesting things to say, people will keep watching you much longer than you might expect them to. Hey, you're still watching after all. And thanks for watching. Join me in the YouTuber chant of like, comment, subscribe. And if you've not yet signed up to join my Patreon group, the link will be below. So thanks for watching again, and I'll see you next week.